What's happening, tabletop gamers? My name is LeunameGames. Welcome back to LeunameGames Unboxes. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Tiny Epic Galaxies by Scott Almes and published by Gamelyn Games. Now, normally I would flip it over and read the back to you, but if you've seen my unboxing of Tiny Epic Galaxies Blast Off, you would know that this is the original version of the game, and Blast Off is a spin-off version. So there's no real reason to read the back of the box to you, because I've read the back of the box, and it's essentially the same thing as it is on Blast Off. So this unboxing is going to be used not just as a way to see what is in this one, but it's also going to be a good way to compare this game compared to Tiny Epic Galaxies Blast Off and see what changes are in the two. So with all that said, let's have a look and see what does the original Tiny Epic Galaxies have to offer us. Both versions of the game come with a control mat. You may immediately notice that the original Tiny Epic Galaxies control mat is much smaller than the one in Blast Off. There's also some design differences. In addition to the obvious change in the artwork, there are 7 spaces for the dice in the original game, whereas there are only 6 spaces for dice in Blast Off. If you look at the converter, there is also a difference in the design for them. The original Tiny Epic Galaxies converter shows 2 dice, showing the changing of a die symbol in the middle of them, versus Tiny Epic Galaxies Blast Off's converter, which is showing simply 1 die and then losing an energy or culture to change the die face. Some of them are similar, like acquiring culture and energy is generally the same on both of the control pads. However, advancing on planets in the original Tiny Epic Galaxies is advancing by diplomacy or economy versus Blast Off's advancement, which is tech or life. There's also a couple minor differences, like for example in the moving of a ship on the original game's control pad, it simply just shows an arrow with a ship and to say move a ship, versus the Blast Off's control pad, the top symbol is actually just a rocket ship. Just like on the bottom symbol of the control pads, the original has a little landing ship, at least that's what it looks like to me, and it says to utilize a colony, rather than Blast Off's control pad on the bottom, it has a little galaxy on it, and it says to utilize a galaxy. The biggest difference, however, is that the original Tiny Epic Galaxies control pad is actually double-sided, whereas Blast Off's is not. The original has a version where you can play single player against a rogue galaxy, and that's what the backside of the original control pad is meant to represent. With a similar layout on the front side, but this one it shows the actions that will be done by the rogue galaxy if you're playing it as a single player game. Both versions of the game also come with a set of galaxy mats that the players will be using. A difference though is that the original Tiny Epic Galaxy mats have 5 mats in the game, meaning up to 5 players can play it, whereas Tiny Epic Galaxies Blast Off only has 4 player mats, so only 4 players can play. The circular graph that helps you keep track of your energy and culture on the 2 mats are pretty much the same. One key difference though is that in the original Galaxies, it writes out the type of things that you can do with the various energies and cultures, whereas in Blast Off, it simply just gives you symbols of what you can do with them. Similarly, in utilizing a colony, or in Blast Off's case, utilizing a galaxy, it allows you to upgrade your empire, but in the original version of the game, it writes out what you need to do to upgrade your empire, whereas in Tiny Epic Galaxies Blast Off, it simply just shows symbols for what you need to do. The components for the players for the 2 games are for the most part the same, But there is one key difference. In the original, there is a simple star token, a little token that has a star on it, and you use that to keep track of what level your empire is at on the side. Whereas in Blast Off, you have a little bar that you'll place on the bottom, and as you upgrade your empire, it will move up and it will show everything within the bar that you will have access to, whereas in the original, you'll simply just move this star token up and you'll have to be paying attention to what side of your empire that your star token is next to figure out what you have. The little bar here, I will say, is a very nice touch for Blast Off, as it makes it a lot easier to track what you have access to. Especially considering that not only does it track what level your empire is at, but it also has the little rocket ship, dice, and energy symbols that will help you keep track of how many dice you get to roll and how many ships you can have at your disposal, rather than simply a star token that you just simply move up and you just have to constantly be looking at that row to figure out what you have. Apart from that though, components wise, the components are effectively the same thing. Each player has a little token to represent their energy and their culture, represented by little tokens, as you can see. The original Tiny Epic Galaxies has, however, a square token to represent energy and a little circular token to represent culture. Blast Off, however, have square tokens to represent their energy and culture. Nothing too extravagant, but it is a change that I've noticed. Oddly enough, in Tiny Epic Galaxies Blast Off, it comes with a first player marker, which is this little rocket ship with a number 1 on it, while the original Tiny Epic Galaxies doesn't have a first player marker. Both games have a set of dice that you will be using to play the game, although you will immediately notice that the original Tiny Epic Galaxies has one more die that you'll be using over Blast Off, as the original has 7 dice, whereas Blast Off only has 6. You may also notice that the dice in the original are actually a little bit smaller than the dice used in Blast Off, and the symbology is a little bit different for each of the symbols that come with the dice. Like I said, there are some similarities with the symbols. For example, both of these lightning bolts means you can gather energy, as well as the culture symbol on both of these dice allow you to generate culture for your empire. And like I said, there are some minor differences, like utilizing a colony for the original is this little ship, whereas Blast Off shows a little galaxy and is trying to utilize a galaxy. The big difference is, like I said, using economy or diplomacy to advance on a planet in the original Tiny Epic Galaxies, whereas Blast Off uses technology and life. Why the difference in how you advance on a planet, I am not entirely sure. I'm also not sure how I feel about having the colors in Tiny Epic Galaxies Blast Off dice being orange with a white insert. I feel like if you have trouble seeing color, that could provide some difficulty with seeing the symbols. Something also that's interesting is that the original Tiny Epic Galaxies has what's known as secret mission cards, and these are just what they sound like. They are secret objectives that gives you an opportunity to gain bonus points if you fulfill certain conditions during the game. And what's interesting about that is that the Tiny Epic Galaxies Blast Off, for some reason, decided to actually get rid of those secret missions. I must say also, I am very impressed with the design of the secret missions. They are very simple to read. It has a little name on each of the objectives, and very simple text that is very accessible, so that you should not have any issues with being able to read them. And finally, there are the planet cards that come with the two games. You'll immediately notice that the designs for the cards for the two games are completely different from each other. Apart from the obvious artwork changes from the two games, you'll also notice is that the effect of the planets in the original Tiny Epic Galaxies are actually written out of what you do with that planet, whereas in Tiny Epic Galaxies Blast Off, the effect for that planet is simply summarized using a series of symbols. And to be completely honest, I much prefer having the effect of the planet being written out to me and explaining what it does, rather than having a series of symbols that I'll have to be constantly looking up to figure out what they do for that planet. But that's just a personal opinion. I know there will be some people who prefer to have it be symbols to represent what the effects of the planets do, rather than simply writing it out in text. You may also notice that the track to colonize the individual planets on the original version of the game, the track to colonize each of the planets are much larger than the ones in Blast Off. In my opinion, that makes this much better, as more ships can easily fit onto that track, so that you're not constantly having to like cram everybody into these tiny tracks. The planet cards for both games does have a symbol in the top right corner representing what type of resource that they'll give out, as well as a series of points that each of the cards will be worth in the bottom right corner. Like I said before, the differences between the two planet cards for the most part are just style choices. The only major difference between the planet cards for the two games is that the original has the text written out for what the effects of the planets do, whereas in Blast Off has little symbols to represent what they do. One last point though that I do want to make is that the original Tiny Epic Galaxies actually has more planets to play through than Blast Off has. If I were to put these two decks side by side with each other, you'll notice that the original Tiny Epic Galaxies has a thicker deck of planet cards to play through than in Blast Off, so that is something that you will want to keep in mind. So that is everything you will get if you obtain Tiny Epic Galaxies, as well as how it compares components-wise to Tiny Epic Galaxies Blast Off. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. If you want to learn how to play the original Tiny Epic Galaxies or Tiny Epic Galaxies Blast Off, or if you want to know my thoughts on them, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more tutorials, reviews, and unboxings. Thank you all as always so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.